The moment people started pulling out their phones, I knew something had gone very wrong. Not the usual kind of wrong you see at a busy farmer's market. You know, someone arguing over tomatoes or a kid knocking over a display of peaches. I'm talking about the kind of wrong where you feel the air change. And the sound that set it all off wasn't shouting or sirens. It was the sharp crack of a wooden cane hitting the pavement after a police officer kicked it out from under a man who clearly needed it to stand. Yeah, that happened. And the officer standing there had no clue that the quiet guy he'd just knocked down was a decorated war veteran who'd spent nearly 30 years serving the very country that officer claimed to protect. Now, the man sitting on that bench that morning was Major Marcus Carter, retired United States Army. 58 years old, built tall and solid like the kind of guy who probably spent half his life carrying a rucksack heavier than most people's gym weights. If you passed him on the street, you'd notice two things right away: his posture straight as a rifle barrel and the cane in his right hand. That cane wasn't for show. 7 years earlier, an IED blast in Afghanistan tore through the armored vehicle he was riding in and nearly took his leg with it. Doctors rebuilt the bone with rods and screws, told him he might never walk normally again. Marcus, being Marcus, proved them wrong. But he kept the cane because some days that leg still reminded him exactly what it had been through. That Saturday morning, he wasn't thinking about war or medals or anything dramatic like that. He was thinking about bread. The farmer's market in Brookfield had been running for decades, the kind of place where neighbors run into each other between vegetable stalls, and someone's always playing acoustic guitar near the fountain. It smelled like roasted corn, fresh apples, and warm sourdough drifting from the bakery truck that rolled in late every weekend. Marcus had already picked up a bag of tomatoes and some sweet corn, and since the bakery truck hadn't arrived yet, he found a bench under a maple tree and sat down to wait. Simple as that. A man with a bad leg resting for a few minutes, enjoying the sunshine, watching families wander through the market. Nothing suspicious about it. But you know how sometimes a normal moment only stays normal until the wrong person decides it isn't. Across the walkway stood a jam vendor named Cheryl Dalton. She'd been selling homemade preserves there for years and saw herself as the unofficial guardian of the market, the type of person who noticed every unfamiliar face and assumed it might mean trouble. She watched Marcus for a few minutes, arms crossed behind her little stand of strawberry and blueberry jars. In her mind, a story started forming. Why is he just sitting there? Why hasn't he bought anything from me? What's with the stick? When Marcus checked his watch, she interpreted that as someone timing something. When he closed his eyes for a moment, she figured he must be intoxicated. When he shifted the tote bag by his feet, she wondered if he'd stolen something. Funny how bias works like that. It fills in blanks with the worst possible version of the story. Eventually, Cheryl pulled out her phone and called 911. Her voice dropped to that quiet, dramatic whisper people use when they want to sound frightened, even when they're not. "There's a man here refusing to leave," she told the dispatcher. "He's making customers uncomfortable. And he's carrying a big stick." She didn't say cane. She said stick. And once that word goes into a police call, you can guess what happens next. 2 blocks away, Officer Tyler Grant was sitting in his patrol car, scrolling through his phone. 29 years old, 4 years on the force, already carrying himself with the kind of swagger that comes from thinking the badge automatically makes you the smartest person in every situation. When the radio call came through, suspicious male refusing to leave the farmer's market, he didn't ask questions, didn't check details, just flipped on the lights and drove over like he was responding to an emergency. People at the market noticed the cruiser before they noticed him. Flashing lights reflecting off the white vendor tents, the low hum of conversation, suddenly slowing down as shoppers turned their heads. Grant stepped out, adjusting his duty belt sunglasses on, scanning the crowd like he'd already decided someone there was guilty of something. It took him maybe 5 seconds to lock onto Marcus sitting on that bench. In Grant's mind, the situation was already solved. Black man, bench, stick. Suspicious call confirmed. He walked straight through the market crowd with that deliberate heavy stride officers sometimes use when they want people to move out of the way. Marcus heard the footsteps before he even looked up. When he did, he saw a young officer standing over him, hand resting near the holster, like it belonged there. No greeting, no introduction. Grant just said, "All right, partner, time to move along." Marcus blinked once, clearly confused. "Excuse me." Grant jerked his thumb toward the street. "Market's not a hangout spot. We've had complaints." Marcus gestured toward the tote bag at his feet. "I bought produce. I'm waiting for the bakery truck." Grant shrugged like he'd already made up his mind. "I don't see a receipt." Marcus looked around the open square, the public benches, the dozens of people walking freely. "This is a public bench," he said calmly. Grant leaned closer. "Manager wants you gone." Marcus glanced past him and saw Cheryl watching from her jam stand, arms crossed with a look of quiet satisfaction. That's when he understood exactly what was happening. He turned back to the officer and kept his voice level. "Officer, I'm not disturbing anyone. I'm just resting my leg." Grant didn't like that tone. Calm confidence can really irritate someone who's expecting fear. "Let me see your ID," he demanded. Marcus stayed seated. "Am I being detained?" The question hit Grant like a slap. Officers hear it sometimes, usually from people who know their rights. Grant's voice hardened instantly. "You're being detained for trespassing." Marcus tilted his head. "You can't trespass someone from a public square without notice." A couple nearby shoppers had started watching the exchange now. Grant could feel a tension building around him, and with it the pressure to win the interaction. "Stand up," he barked. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus nodded slowly. "I can stand, but I need my cane." He reached carefully for the wooden handle beside him. That's when everything exploded. "Drop the weapon." Grant shouted loud enough that conversations across the market stopped. Marcus froze, hand hovering near the cane. "It's a cane," he said quietly. "I'm a disabled veteran." Grant's adrenaline had already taken control of the moment. "I said drop it," he repeated, pulling his taser halfway from the holster. Marcus kept his voice steady. "I can't stand without it." But Grant wasn't listening anymore. In one sudden motion, he kicked the cane away from the bench. The wood clattered across the pavement, and Marcus's injured leg collapsed under him. He fell hard, the kind of fall that knocks the breath out of you and sends pain racing up your spine. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out almost instantly. "Hey, he didn't do anything," someone shouted. Grant ignored them, pushing Marcus onto his stomach and snapping handcuffs around his wrists. "Stop resisting," he yelled. Marcus's face pressed against the pavement as he struggled to breathe through the pain. "I'm not resisting," he said through clenched teeth. "My leg. I can't move it." Grant hauled him up anyway, dragging him toward the patrol car as cameras recorded everything. The ride to the station was quiet except for Marcus's controlled breathing. Anyone who's spent years in the military knows that look, the calm that comes from discipline even when you're furious. Marcus wasn't yelling, wasn't threatening. He was memorizing details, badge number, time of day, street names. That kind of focus becomes second nature when you've spent decades documenting battlefield reports. Officer Grant, meanwhile, still believed he was in control of the situation. But that illusion started to crack the moment they walked into the station. Sergeant Daniel Reeves looked up from his desk and immediately frowned. 30 years in law enforcement teaches you how to read a room fast. Seeing a well-dressed older man limping in handcuffs triggered every alarm in Reeves's head. "What happened?" he asked. Grant ran through the script. Trespassing. Failure to identify. Suspect had a weapon. Reeves turned to Marcus. Sir Marcus lifted his chin slightly. Major Marcus Carter. Marcus. United States Army retired. Purple Heart recipient. And that officer just assaulted a disabled veteran. The room went silent. Reeves stared at Grant for a long moment before saying 3 words that changed everything. "Uncuff him. Now." Grant hesitated. Reeves didn't. "Now." The cuffs came off. Marcus rubbed his wrists while Reeves carefully opened his wallet and pulled out the blue military retiree ID. Then he saw the Purple Heart card tucked behind it. Reeves exhaled slowly and set the wallet down on the counter. "You arrested a decorated officer," he said quietly to Grant for sitting on a bench. Grant suddenly looked much younger than 29. By that afternoon, the videos from the market were everywhere online. The clip of a police officer kicking away a veteran's cane spread across social media faster than anyone could contain it. News stations picked it up, national commentators weighed in, and the city attorney reportedly told the mayor one thing after watching the body cam footage: settle immediately. 3 weeks later, the city of Brookfield agreed to pay Marcus Carter $1.6 million. Officer Tyler Grant was fired 6 days after the incident and permanently decertified from working in law enforcement. Cheryl, the vendor who made the call, lost her booth after the market board revoked her license. But here's the part people still argue about. The settlement money didn't come from Grant's pocket or Cheryl's pocket. It came from the city, from taxpayers. And that raises a question that sparks debates every time this story comes up. Should officers personally pay when they violate someone's rights? Or should the public keep covering those costs? Marcus spent 6 months in physical therapy, repairing damage from that fall, and he never returned to that market again. So what do you think? Was justice actually served, or did the system still protect the wrong people? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever witnessed something like this, a moment where assumptions turned an ordinary day into something ugly, share that story too. Because sometimes hearing the truth from real people is the only way the conversation moves forward.